On Fridays, I have to admit with this new podcast, I sometimes struggle to think about what to write about because it's mainly movie openings and stuff like that. But today, the subject and the topic of what I want to talk about for today's podcast comes courtesy of my favorite directing hack, Rian Johnson. He made a statement that is mind-blowingly terrible, and it definitely explains why he did such a poor job directing The Last Jedi. So I'm going to talk about that today. So be sure to like this video, share it out if you're on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to my channel and ring the bell, turn on all notifications, because YouTube does this weird thing where they kind of curate your subscription feed instead of showing you things in chronological order. So be sure to do that. That way you get a notification right away. If you're on Facebook, be sure to like this video and share it out. Put it in some groups, and also do the same thing. Like the page and turn on all notifications. That way you get notified whenever I post something new. With all that in mind, sit back, relax, and welcome to Studio Jake. Everyone who knows me well knows that I am not a fan of Rian Johnson. I think all his movies are bad, not just The Last Jedi. I've been a huge critic of Looper. People like it because it's kind of visually pleasing, and it's kind of has a new kind of take on time travel. Although I would say his take on time travel is way worse than the Star Wars and Star Trek take on time travel. For those of you who are wondering, yes, time travel is in Star Wars. They introduced it in Star Wars Rebels. Um, that had a more coherent understanding of time travel, definitely. But anyway, back to Rian Johnson. I think that his take on time travel was pretty bad, and also there is a glaring plot hole in Looper that pretty much destroys the concept of the film that Rian Johnson introduces. So in fact, whenever he was announced as the director of The Last Jedi, I was telling people, I think this is bad. Looper is one of the most overrated science fiction films of all time. Now, someone did kind of tell me, hey, well, listen, but the director of Empire Strikes Back, at the time, he was kind of just a regular, almost B-movie director. He hadn't done like a huge production. And so I was kind of like, okay, yeah, I guess I kind of see that. So I went into it with an open mind and had my expectations subverted, as Rian Johnson puts it. He definitely subverted my expectations to the point where I almost dropped the franchise completely. Fortunately, my adoration for Darth Vader as the series' main antagonist in the original trilogy kept me in Star Wars. But anyway, one thing that he's always doubled down on is how he ruined Luke Skywalker. And he actually discusses in an interview with Vanity Fair, he said something that really made me go, oh, it all makes sense now why he's such a terrible director and why he is such a, especially when it came to Star Wars. So, speaking of Vanity Fair, Rian Johnson, who he was talking about um, the underwhelming reception of The Last Jedi, but also the reaction to Knives Out, which I have not seen yet. A few people have told me I should see it. There's even a guy who I'm friends with. He writes for the Gotham Knights website, which is kind of a fan site for the Batman Arkham games, and he actually told me he was surprised by how much he liked it. Because he doesn't like he agrees with me. He doesn't like Rian Johnson films, but he actually was surprised that this was actually a good film. And so I haven't seen it yet. I do have a review for it on my blog, but it's written by someone else. Someone else saw it and wrote it up, which is fine. So anyway, Johnson, he says about kind of universes and being a creator. This is him speaking. I don't really think in terms of universes or in terms of creating worlds or whatever. That's not that interesting to me. The only thing that is interesting to me is the story. The story specific to, like, whether you're writing a Star Wars films, that's part of a 3-movie trilogy, or an original thing like Knives Out. You are still telling a story that is new to the thing that you are doing. That it has to work within the context of that movie. Okay, a couple of problems with this. That's not how it works when you're adding on to a series. When you're doing standalone films, you can make the movie however you want. There's no question about that. But you can't, what's the word I'm looking for? But you can't subvert, quote, to use his word, you can't subvert expectations when you're building a franchise. You have to go by the established rules, which is why, Catching Fire builds off of the Hunger Games. And of course, when it went to Mockingjay, I really feel like with Mockingjay, they stretched out the story too much, and that's why kind of part one was okay, but then part two, it was a little rough. But you can't do that. You have to go with the established rules of the universe. Every universe has a set of rules that is established. Now you can do some changes, but they have to, from one story to the next, but they have to make sense. So you go from the original trilogy, which is in a dark time. They have the Jedi Order has to rise again, and Luke Skywalker has to overcome what his father has really accomplished as the villainous Darth Vader. And then you have to go back to the prequel trilogy, and it's set before that time, so that gave George Lucas a little bit more wiggle room, because he could ultimately say, oh, well, this came off differently. Well, that's because it's an older time and they're using different verbiage. So that's the whole thing with metachlorians. And I don't know why people make such a big deal about metachlorians. Metachlorians are just a biological aspect of the Force. And even in the original trilogy, they talk about how they talk about how the Force lives within beings, and they even use metachlorians as a plot point in the Star Wars Clone Wars series, which fans who were angry and about wetting themselves with madness over the metachlorians thing, they were kind of like, oh yeah, I guess that makes sense. Duh. But anyway, I think it's kind of dumb and foolish that George Lucas got all this hate over metachlorians and council meetings when it was clearly set at a different time. It wasn't meant to be the same. With Rian Johnson, what he does is his takes place after the fact of the original trilogy, and also after the fact of what J.J. Abrams put. So at least with J.J. Abrams, they still had this concept of a light side of the Force and a dark side of the Force. And even though I thought the first film was kind of mediocre, and they kind of made Rey a Mary Sue, which they did, let's not pretend, at least the characters had this arc that was really interesting, and it went forward. Whenever you bring in Rian Johnson, who wants to do his own thing, he immediately goes off the established order. He practically ignored all the setup in The Force Awakens, so you kind of have this weird standalone movie that didn't make a lot of sense. And that's why when The Rise of Skywalker comes along, they're saying all these things that you're glad because it retcons the Last Jedi, but you're also really confused. And so that's why they're doing all these post-edits and the novelization. So Emperor Palpatine, he didn't really have a son. It was a failed clone of his that he called his son. You didn't have Rey and Kylo develop like this affection for one another in a romantic sense. You just had like a gratitude thing, and that's why they kissed at the end. It's all these crazy, and even in The Rise of Skywalker, there are some hanging threads of plot points. We don't know what Finn was going to say. What's funny is I actually got into an argument with someone at, I won't say who, but at a place of former employment, where he and I were arguing about that, and I said we never find out what Finn was going to say, and he said, well, that's okay, that's a mystery that's kind of left open, and I said, yeah, but they talked about it twice. I said you have to answer that question, but because J.J. Abrams likes to open mystery boxes, even in this final movie, he had to leave open a mystery box, and I honestly think he's hoping that they'll invite him back. But no one is going to invite Rian Johnson back. He was the one. I don't know if you remember this, but um, Lucasfilms and actually hired some Game of Thrones producers. I think the main two, their names escape me at the moment, but they had actually hired them to work with Rian Johnson to develop another Star Wars trilogy, which now, thank goodness, that's appropriately canceled. That was such a terrible idea to have him back, and it also hired them. Now, I'm not a Game of Thrones fans, but all my friends who are Game of Thrones fans are still bitter at how that last season ended. They're very angry about it. So I really think they wouldn't have had that problem if George R. R. Martin had just finished. He had 8 years to do it, and I know I'm not really one to talk. It's taken me a year to finish the sequel to The Seven Royals, All Good Things, but it hasn't taken me 8 years to do that. Just finish it. Anyway, so Rian Johnson, he doesn't understand storytelling. This is so apparent. He doesn't understand storytelling. He doesn't understand crafting a narrative. He doesn't understand character development or plots. He just is like, hey, is this going to be cool in the story? Duh. And that is not how storytelling works. You have to set your character in a genre, in a setting that matches with the story you're telling, especially if you're doing the middle of a trilogy. And I really think that it certainly explains all the mistakes he made. And also, he was kind of known as Kathleen Kennedy's whipping boy. That's a rumor that's going around. One of the reasons that Colin Trevorrow apparently was fired was he saw the rough cut of The Last Jedi. Now, this is all rumors, but he threw a fit about it and said, how can I do a sequel to this? And Kathleen Kennedy basically fired him. Now, I'm not saying Colin Trevorrow's final film would have been exciting, but I think it would have connected at least, because no one really had a plan there. Say what you want to about the prequel series, George Lucas had a plan. He was like, I want to get to Darth Vader. That's what I'm going for. I'm going to get from a young Anakin Skywalker being introduced to the Star Wars universe to I'm going to get to Darth Vader. That's what he wanted. That's what he planned. Good for him. But you can tell Kathleen Kennedy and Bob Iger and J.J. Abrams, who had creative control over this massive property, really dropped the ball. And I honestly think for the final film, they should have brought in a more heavy hitter like Steven Spielberg, because even though I kind of think Steven Spielberg has been hit or miss lately, he's still a better filmmaker than both Colin Trevorrow and J.J. Abrams combined. That's just reality. In fact, my favorite J.J. Abrams film, Super 8, which for some reason I'm finding out people don't really think of that as a good film, but I think it's a good film. Not saying it's blow me away amazing, but it's actually my favorite J.J. Abrams films, and that's the one where he and Steven Spielberg work together. Now, of course, that's just my personal opinion. Don't come from me. I've got one more thing I want to talk about today. And this just shows how you can beat censorship. Now, everyone who knows me knows I'm pro-life. I am for babies being protected when they're in the womb of their mother. I am pro-birth. I am pro-life. I am pro-family. And I'm pro if the woman doesn't have the baby, give it up for adoption. Those are my beliefs, and I will not back down. I will not apologize for those beliefs. So one of the things that I was a huge supporter of was the Unplanned film, which told the story of Abby Johnson, who worked for Planned Parenthood, and then she actually saw, she says, a fetus being aborted, and she saw the baby struggle against the abortionist, like it was trying to survive, and it forever changed her perspective on going from this Planned Parenthood almost executive to being this pro-life activist. Now, I do have to say, I really recommend people watch the film. It's not a perfect film. It definitely has flaws, and there have been numerous reviews who have pointed this out. If you go to my website, I focus what's positive about the film. Like I said, because there's so many negative reviews, because the people exaggerate the negativity because they don't like this cause for some reason. People don't like protecting babies for some reason. But I was a huge supporter of the film. I went to the premiere and got to meet some of the people behind the film, like David A.R. White, who, of course, is one of PureFlix's big guys. I got to meet Mark Lindell, who helped fund it. I got to meet the directors, but I also got to meet Ashley Bratcher, who, of course, stars as Abby Johnson in the film. So I'm going to read this. This is, now I was actually kind of a part of this. I was part of this story because I retweeted some of Ashley Bratcher's comments. So basically the gist of what happened was the Movie Guide Awards nominated Unplanned for 3 categories. Now, the Movie Guide Awards is kind of like the Academy Awards for family-friendly films, basically. They reward films that they feel the family could get something out of it. Now, Unplanned, there was some controversy over it being rated R, because it is rated R, but I actually agreed with its rating because there are some scenes that are incredibly hard to watch, that are incredibly medically accurate and graphic, just showing how an abortion harms a woman. And so for that reason, I actually think it should have been rated R. Just my opinion. Don't come for me. I'm not saying that it's a bad movie and that Christians shouldn't watch it. Christians should watch it. I'm just saying because of the nature of the content, it should have been rated R. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, so the Movie Guide Awards nominated it. Again, this is supposed to be for family-friendly content, and I'm glad Unplanned got nominated. It was nominated in 3 categories. Now, I don't think it actually won any of these awards. However, they let the cast come up a couple of times. They let Ashley Bratcher give a speech, I think, and just like you do at an award ceremony. And apparently, the Hallmark Channel that it aired, I think it actually aired on their drama channel. They cut everything to do with Unplanned out of the film, and Ashley Bratcher talked about this on her Twitter. Now, I'm going to read an article from lifenews.com. They are going, they have the story like a little bit in better detail, so I'm going to read this article. This is, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing this name right, but it's Micaiah Bilger, based out of Washington, D.C., who is writing for Life News. So, the Hallmark Channel will air an awards show featuring the pro-life film Unplanned After All. Earlier this week, actress Ashley Bratcher, who stars in the film, accused the popular channel of cutting out all mentions of the film during its recent broadcast of the Movie Guide Awards. Unplanned was nominated for 3. Later, however, Abby Johnson, on whom the film is based, said it was Movie Guide that censored the film. On Wednesday, the Washington Examiner confirmed that the problem began with Movie Guide, not Hallmark. Responding to public outrage, the awards group admitted that it cut all mentions of the film from its broadcast. However, it did not explain why. According to the report, Movie Guide has taken responsibility for cutting Unplanned from the broadcast that aired on Hallmark Drama. We made some decisions, Ted Baer, founder and publisher of Movie Guide, said. We may have made some wrong decisions, but we've made decisions. Hallmark agreed to re-air the award show with the Unplanned nominations at 10 p.m. March 9th. Bratcher thanked the channel for doing the right thing. Hallmark has gone on the record, and the Movie Guide Award will re-air to include Unplanned's nominations. Please be sure to tune in or stream on the Hallmark app. I have received and accepted apologies, extended grace. My friends, thanks to all. In a statement to the Examiner, Hallmark also apologized to Bratcher and promised to re-air their show. We have scheduled the Movie Guide Awards to re-air on Hallmark Drama on Monday, March 9th at 10 p.m., a spokesperson said in an email. It will also be available on the TV Everywhere app. All telecasts will include mentions of the film Unplanned and its lead actress. We at Crown Media extend our sincere apologies to Ms. Bratcher. The Movie Guide Awards celebrate excellence in Christian and family-friendly entertainment. Unplanned received 3 nominations this year at the Faith and Freedom Awards for Movies, which is kind of like their Best Picture, Best Movie for Mature Audiences, which they rate basically mature films, but they're good for the family. So I think so. Like films like A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood were nominated, and the Grace Award for Bratcher's performance. So that's similar to the Best Actress Award. So, like I said, I am against. I really don't understand why Movie Guide and Hallmark decided to do this. Now, Movie Guide, like they said, has taken all responsibility. A lot of people were blaming Hallmark for this because when the film was in theaters, they refused to run ads for it. And I've seen some of the ads they wanted to run. They were very innocuous. They didn't have any graphic content. Now, Movie Guide, I don't understand why you would nominate a film and then not include it in the broadcast. There's a difference between, and apparently from what we just read, it's obvious it wasn't a decision to cut for time, but you don't eliminate all mentions for time's sake. That's not how it works. You cut out maybe awards that are not as popular, maybe some of the technical awards, which is what the Academy Awards does, and stuff like that. You don't cut out all mentions and all films that you don't like just because or maybe you do like them, but you're worried people won't. I think that's kind of foolish. I think it's dumb. Censorship is bad, and shame on Movie Guide Awards and Hallmark for doing it, but also kudos to them for realizing their mistake and moving on with it and rebroadcasting it with Unplanned mentioned. Good for them, and congratulations Ashley Bratcher and the makers of Unplanned and Abby Johnson. This is what happens when we speak out against censorship. We can overcome and we can beat them. So once again, that's fantastic. That's all the time I have for today. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like this video, share it with your friends. Don't forget to find me on the social media. You can find me on YouTube, StudioJake. Facebook is author Jacob Airy. On Instagram, Twitter, and Parler, I'm Real Jacob Airy. You can find my website, jacobairy.blog, where I do movie reviews, TV show reviews. I discuss celebrity news and things like that. Head over there. It's JACOBAIRY.blog, and also pick yourself up a copy of my novel, The Seven Royals, All Good Things, and you can get that on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, Walmart.com. You can download it for Apple Books, or if you're on Rakuten, you can get it on their Kobo e-reader downloads. It's really cool. So definitely pick up a copy. What really helps me though is if you get it from booklocker.com, which purchases it directly from my publisher. So head to any of those places and get yourself a copy. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time right here on Studio Jake.